This is Steve from Boxing UK in association with Supreme CBD. Delighted to be joined by Dazn's big fight commentator, Chris Mannix. How are you, sir?
I'm good, man. How you doing?
Probably a little bit more tired than you, Chris. UK fans will have stopped up late last night. For Taylor-Serrano, you had the privilege of being there ringside. Can you sum up what it was like in the garden last night for us?
It was as good as any atmosphere that I've been a part of in boxing, right up there with the Anthony Joshua Ruiz fight, Canelo Alvarez fights, Floyd Mayweather, Manny Pacquiao fights. I mean, this was billed as the biggest fight in women's boxing history. It felt like it in the garden on Saturday. And, you know, when it came to, like, say, Joshua versus Ruiz, you had 99% Anthony Joshua fans in that building on Saturday. I would guess like 60-40 maybe fans for Katie Taylor, but plenty of Amanda Serrano fans who were really vocal throughout the course of that fight. So just one of the best atmospheres I've ever been a part of.
Well, that high, because it was obviously it's a historic event anyway. But we heard you say on commentary it was pretty close in regards to the Puerto Ricans and the Irish.
Yeah. I mean, there was. It just depended on what the moment was, right? Like, you know, when Amanda Serrano made her ring walk, you heard all of the Brooklyn Puerto Rican fan base going crazy for her coming out. Katie's fan base is obviously massive, especially in New York with locals and transplants, people flying out for this fight. You just had you had passionate fans on both sides. There was not any fans that came into the building indifferent to the outcome. Everybody that came into that building on Saturday, felt like a connection to that fight. Would have been and were hurt by the outcome of that fight. They had a vested interest in that fight. So it was everything you could have possibly asked for in a big fight.
What did you make of the ring walks, Chris? Because there couldn't have been more of a contrast between the two girls.
Yeah, they were interesting. Amanda, I haven't seen too many of her ring walks. But yeah, look, it had some energy to it. It had a New York vibe to it when she came out. And then Katie, her ring walk, methodical to say the least. When she made the walk, I don't think I've ever seen Katie or frankly any fighter walk that slowly to the ring. She seemed to be absorbing the magnitude of the moment, or, as I suggested on the broadcast, maybe there was some gamesmanship to it. Like, make Amanda Serrano wait in the ring as long as possible. We've seen, whether it's in the UK, you've got, Anthony Joshua does some of the longest ring walks you've ever seen. And look, you're making guys wait or making women wait in this case can have a strategic value in a fight. So I don't know why the ring walk was that slow for Katie Taylor, but it certainly was a pretty incredible moment as Katie kind of absorbed like all of the cheers from the fans.
The fight itself, Chris, it was unbelievable for 10 rounds. Two things. Can you talk us through it? And did you think that fight was over in the fifth round?
Well, look, the first few rounds were back and forth. And that's really where, the fight, the scoring was decided. Most people agree that Amanda Serrano won the middle rounds, 4, 5, and 6, especially 5, where she almost had her out on her feet. Most people agree that Katie Taylor swept through most of the last few rounds. It's those first few rounds that you couldn't quite figure out. I scored 2 out of the 3 for Amanda Serrano, as did one other judge. Tony Bellew was there. He scored all 3 for Katie Taylor. An official judge did that as well. You just couldn't, there wasn't as much action in those first 3 rounds. It was more of a tactical fight. I leaned towards Serrano because from where I was sitting ringside, it just felt like Amanda's punches were more impactful. Katie wasn't landing the sharp combination she was landing towards the end of that fight. And when I'm judging fights, I'm not necessarily concerned with the volume of punches, but the impact of punches, the kind of damage or the force that they're delivered with. I thought Amanda, in 2 of those 3 rounds, was able to do that. But you mentioned the 5th round. And look, if you had told me after that 5th round that Katie Taylor was going to win that fight, I would never have believed it. Like, Katie Taylor looked beaten. She took 44 punches from arguably the biggest puncher in women's boxing. She looked out on her feet at the tail end of that fight. She was bloodied. She was beaten. She looked like she was done. Looked like it was only a matter of time before Amanda Serrano either got her down or the referee, Michael Griffin, who people in the UK are probably familiar with. I mean, he was the referee that stopped the Anthony Joshua fight back in 2019. He made a tough call then. And as I said on air, Michael Griffin might have to make a tough call right now. So in that fifth round, I thought she was done. That was peak Amanda Serrano, and Katie Taylor backed against the ropes, trading punches with her, just looked like she was finished.
Because it was such a close fight, Chris, when we're ringside in the UK, it's quite often known for Eddie to come in and go straight over to the commentators and see how they've gauged the fight. Did you do that last night?
No, I saw him in the ring right afterwards, before I was doing the interview, before the decision was announced. I told him I had a draw, and he said he thought a draw or 1 point for Katie Taylor. That's how he saw the fight. And I'm fine with that. Look, you could fights like that, there's no robbery. I did think 97-93 for Taylor was a little bit wide, but 96-93 for Taylor, 96-94 for Serrano. It reminded me, honestly, in a way, of the Golovkin-Canelo second fight, where I had it 114-113 for Golovkin. The judges gave it 114-113 for Canelo Alvarez. If you have just a couple of rounds that are swinging the fight, that's not a robbery. That's just the way it goes. So judges see things very different ways. And as I said, those first three rounds were very difficult to score. And you could see it in the way the judges scored the fight. They agreed on a lot of rounds in this fight. So those first three were kind of back and forth. So when I saw Eddie in the ring, I think he was cautiously optimistic that at the very least they were going to come away with a draw.
Good man. Chris, one of the most popular British pastimes on fight night is for boxing fans to get on social media and hammer somebody. It seemed to be your turn last night. Yeah, your scorecard's got quite a bit of flack. Just your right to reply to the people that have been a little bit unkind to you online, Chris.
It doesn't matter. Like, that's what Twitter's for, right? To just anonymously vent at people. Like, oh, whatever. Like, I look, I always love boxing fans because they're passionate. I just think, boxing's biggest problem is not that its fans are bad. It's that we just need more of them, especially in the US. They're not as widespread as basketball fans and football fans and even baseball fans. We need more of that passion. So if people disagree with me, that's fine. I'm just telling you, you're not disagreeing with my scorecard. You're disagreeing with the first three rounds. That's it. Like, that's basically it. Because after that, everyone had Amanda Serrano winning those middle rounds. Everyone, including me, had Katie Taylor winning those last rounds. She swept all 4 rounds of the last rounds on all 3 judges' scorecards. Swept all 4 of the last 4 rounds on my scorecard. People just saw things a different way at the very beginning of the fight. And I'm fine with that. I'm just telling you how I score fights. I look for the impactfulness of punches. And in those first couple of rounds, second and third in particular, it just seemed to me that Amanda was landing just a little bit more when it came to impactful punches. But, bring it on social media. I could not possibly care less. I love it. I mean, I love the passion. Brings people back watching more boxing. And that's good for the sport.
Good, man. Back to the boxing, Chris. Do you think you'll see a rematch?
I do. A lot of it depends on what the final viewership numbers are, both globally and specifically in the United States, which is still DAZN's biggest market. There still is the highest subscriber base, I believe, in the U.S. So I think we'll wait to see what the viewership numbers are when they come in. But this was such a big event. Like, they had so much mainstream interest in this fight. I mean, my publication, Sports Illustrated, we committed 8 pages to it. That's not something we ever commit to boxing matches. That's how big it was. I saw Katie and Amanda on the Today Show in the U.S. in New York. You never see boxers on Today's Show. Those kind of appearances, press, that gives you a avenue to fans that you don't usually get to. Like, people watch the Today Show are probably not boxing fans. I can tell you, most people reading Sports Illustrated are probably not boxing fans. So I got to believe the numbers are going to be really good. And if they are good, I don't think that'll stop Eddie Hearn, DAZN, Jake Paul from dangling 7-figure paydays in front of Amanda and Katie again and do it before the end of the year. I think the only question is, where does that fight take place? I mean, Eddie Hearn floated the idea of Ireland. I would love to see Katie Taylor at Croke Park in Ireland, in Dublin, doing a big event there. She is the biggest star, and I'm not telling your audience they don't know, but she's the biggest star in Irish boxing, Irish sports history out there. So having her there in front of 75, 80,000 fans would be a sight to see. I don't think that's possible, at least not for this next fight. So in lieu of that, go back to Madison Square Garden. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Do it in New York. Same kind of crowd, same kind of atmosphere, same kind of fight that as we sit here right now, if they did a rematch, I would not know who would win that fight.
Good, man. Anything else on the card stand out for you, Chris? There was plenty of British interest. Galal Yafai impressed all of us over here.
Yeah, I like Galal a lot. I think he's doing the right thing to put himself in the world title position quickly by taking these 10-round fights against experienced opponents. He is an offensive machine. There's no doubt about that. What he and Rob McCracken obviously going to have to work on is making sure he doesn't get hit quite so much, because when you go up against the better fighters in your weight class, and there are a lot of good hitters in that flyweight, super flyweight range, you're going to wind up taking some punishment. You might get knocked out by one of those guys. But look, he's not, he's taking these fights not necessarily on a fast track by Matchroom, so he's going to have time to grow into it. He's got a great coach in Rob McCracken, so they'll figure it out over the next couple of years. I was really impressed with Liam Smith. Liam all week long was telling anyone that would listen that he's the true 154, and he was going to be the bigger man and be able to assert his physical dominance in the ring. And from like the second or third round on, that's exactly what he did. So at 33 years old, Liam Smith, who was thinking about retirement if he had lost that fight to Jesse Vargas, he is right back in that world title picture. If the belts fragment at some point after this Charlo Castano fight next month, I can see Liam Smith getting a world title opportunity over in the UK sooner rather than later.
Good, man. A couple of quick ones, Chris, while you're there. Jake Paul, obviously heavily involved this week. What's your thoughts on Jake Paul in boxing? Because he divides opinion over here, right down the middle.
I think Jake Paul is fantastic for boxing. I don't understand why people think he's bad for boxing. I would say this. People that criticize his choice of opponents, go back and look at your favorite fighters' first 5 fights. Just take a look at the resume. Look at their first 5 fights. It is just awful. Like, they don't fight anybody in their first 5 fights. So Jake Paul's getting more visibility than your run-of-the-mill fighter who's just starting his boxing career, but he's not facing significantly lesser competition. In fact, I'd argue that guys like Tyron Woodley and whoever he fights next year, or this year rather, are probably better than most of the opponents that some of these other guys. I mean, I've done this with Sergio Mora, my broadcast partner. I've said, Sergio, I can go back and look at your resume. You fought guys, I think they're accountants now. Like, they're not real fighters. Like, they're not in the game anymore. So you can't criticize Jake Paul for his opponents given where he is. On top of that, he is raising the profile of other quote unquote real fighters. Amanda Serrano would not be making 7 figures without Jake Paul. This fight would not have sold out or come close to selling out Madison Square Garden without Jake Paul. I'm sorry. It's true. Jake Paul haters, have that all you want, but he has been influential, very influential to the career of Amanda Serrano. Has been influential to the career of Montana Love. I mean, how many people knew Montana Love was before he scored that knockout win on Jake Paul's undercard? Next time out, gets the deal with Eddie Hearn, multi-fight deal, and now could fight for a 140-pound title at some point this year. Jake's had something to do with that. So, you can call his fights dumb, gimmicky, whatever you want, but he is a net positive for boxing. There's no doubt about it.
We heard him say to Eddie that he would take on any of his stable with under 10 fights, and we've had 1 or 2 have risen to that challenge, Chris.
I don't think, I'm not surprised. Like, everyone that criticizes Jake Paul, often just wants the payday that comes with fighting him. Like, there's a method to the madness of engaging with Jake Paul. I don't think Jake's going to do that. Look, Jake doesn't want to fight a young prospect from Eddie's stable. He wants to fight Julio Cesar Chavez Sr. or Jr. rather, maybe Sr. too, who knows. He wants to fight Tommy Fury probably, and he probably will at some point this year. He wants to fight guys that are, that he knows he's on the same level or better than, and he knows can sell tickets or pay-per-views or whatever it is that he's fighting on at that time. It's a great strategy. I mean, the guy's making money. He's not putting himself in significant harm. And for boxing, he's raising the profile again of the sport. He's not taking somebody's, Showtime slot or DAZN slot. He's doing it on pay-per-view. So if you don't like it, don't buy it. If you do like it, buy it. Maybe you'll see a real fighter like Amanda Serrano or Montana Love that you want to watch moving forward.
And he was quite good on the core comms last night as well. Quite enjoyed him.
He was good. Jake came to the fighter meeting we had with Jesse Vargas and Liam Smith. He took notes. He asked questions. He was prepared. And I thought he was really good calling that fight.
Canelo Bivol next week, Chris. Just your very quick thoughts on that one. Is this Canelo's hardest test, do you think?
I don't know. I mean, I think Golovkin, the first couple were really tough. And you can go back even further in Canelo's career to Floyd and Erislandy Lara and those guys that he fought that were really good. I think Bivol's the real deal. I mean, he's a legit 175-pounder with a piston rod jab and some power behind that right hand. The question with Bivol is that he hasn't really shown that power in recent years. I don't know what he attributes that to. He's told me that, look, it takes two to tango and guys won't engage with him. I don't really buy that. I think he's become a little more reluctant to engage. And when guys don't engage with Canelo, they tend to lose. You can't jab your way to a win against Canelo. We saw Sergey Kovalev try to do it. We saw Callum Smith briefly try to do it. We've seen fighter after fighter try to jab their way to a win against Canelo Alvarez, and it never works. So I think Bivol has the talent and the power to give Canelo problems, but he's going to have to engage with him. And we have not seen a fighter engage with Canelo in 4 years now, since the second fight with Gennady Golovkin. And I'm not sure going in that Bivol is going to be the guy to change that.
Good man. Very last one, Chris, for those of us over here that want to hear more from you, or those haters that want to hear more from you for other reasons, you've got a podcast, haven't you? Quite a successful one.
You did? Yeah, we do one every week. Boxing with Chris Mannix. It's part of the Volume Podcast Network. You can get on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever everyone gets their podcast. We talk boxing once a week. We've got a Taylor-Serrano episode that's going up right now. And I'll answer all the questions. Look, I'm always happy to talk about what I said in a broadcast and what my scorecard would look like. I've learned a long time ago not to write something or to say something unless you're willing to defend it. So I'm always happy to talk about this stuff. And again, I remind people, you're not talking about the scorecard. You're talking about the first 3 rounds. The first 3 rounds, the only rounds that are really in doubt in this fight. The rest of it, everyone was kind of on the same page.
Brilliant. Chris Mannix, we look forward to speaking to you hopefully after Canelo Bivol next week. I really appreciate your time over there. Chris Mannix, thanks for your time.
Sure.